Hey, this is Peter with Unison, and today we're going to be reconstructing a patch in the style of RL Grime and Salva's remix to Travis Scott's Skyfall. We're going to be trying to replicate the drop lead as closely as possible using just a single instance of Xfer's Serum. So let's start off by listening to the finished patch. And you can check out the MIDI data here. And while you check that out, I'll play back the reference for you so that you can see that we're in the general ballpark. So for those of you who just want to download this patch, you can find a link to it in the description below. And for those of you who want to learn to recreate it from scratch, let's dive right in. Let's start by initializing a fresh preset. So here's our starting point. We'll start by dropping down oscillator A by an octave, just so that it lines up with the MIDI data that I've already created. So the first things that I notice when I listen to the reference are that 1, we're dealing with a monophonic synth, 2, the portamento is a big part of the sound, and 3, the core waveform is probably going to be something like a pinched pulse wave through a distortion of some sort. So first let's switch over to mono, since we're only going to be playing one note at a time. So I'm pretty sure that in the reference the pitch glides are all performed manually, but I'm going to try to approximate a similar sound using Xfer's portamento section here. It's just easier that way since I'm only sharing the preset with you and not uploading any automation data. So I'm going to start by activating always, since we always want pitch glide between each of our notes. I'm also going to activate scaled so that the pitch glides take a shorter amount of time for notes that are closer together than for notes that are further apart. And then I will dial up our portamento. The further clockwise I turn the portamento knob, the longer the pitch glides will take. That sounds about right. So now let's head up to oscillator A and figure out what sort of wavetable we want to use. So I'm pretty sure I want to start with some sort of a pulse wave. So I already know which one I'm going to use, but typically I'll just start at the beginning here and scroll through until I hear what I want. So I'm going to use this as our starting point with the wavetable position set to 22. And I'm just going to turn down our random phase so that every note starts in the same phase. So let's compare these just to see where we're starting from. Alright, so I like the harmonic content of this, but obviously it's really small and thin. We're going to go ahead and amp it up with some distortion and compression. Let's head over to our FX section and throw on a distortion plugin. I'll just turn up the drive a little bit to start off so we can hear an effect. So off the bat, I'm thinking that we'll probably be using a tube distortion or some sort of a diode. That doesn't sound... The tube doesn't really add enough weight for me, so I'm going to go to the diodes. Just a heads up that they get a bit louder. I like what diode 2 is doing for us, but there's that kind of sizzly top end that we don't need. And since we're trying to recreate the entire patch within Serum, and Serum's EQ just has 2 bands, I'm going to go ahead and utilize the filter built into the distortion plugin. So I'm going to set this in pre to roll off all that annoying top end. Then I'm going to assign macro 1 to the frequency of our filter. We can label that edge, since that's effectively what it will do. And then we will dial in the edge here to taste. Let's check that out. Alright, so we definitely need to mellow this out a little bit more and sculpt the tone. So let's head over to our multiband compressor. And we're going to use this for 2 things. One, we're going to put it in multiband mode so that we get the benefit of an additional 3 EQ points. And also this just has the effect of pulling the sound forward in the mix. We want it to sound a little bit more upfront than it currently does. Alright, so I'm just going to play around with these knobs until I like what I hear. And we want that little bit of a tick that it gives us at the beginning of the sound. We don't need all this low end. That's starting to sound a bit closer. So we definitely still have some low frequency content that we don't need. So let's add a high pass filter. I'm thinking maybe let's try a high 24. Somewhere in there. And we can add a little bit of level back with the drive knob. Adds a little bit of color as well. Alright, we really need some reverb on this, so let's toss that in. I'm going to put that after the filter. So we're probably going to want Hall. Let's just see how it sounds by default. We don't need all the low end going to our reverb, so let's dial in these filters and then set our decay time and size. Okay, so we still need to dial the EQ in a little bit closer. So let's add an EQ plugin. Sounds like we need to add a little bit of body in the low mids and maybe a little bit of presence as well. Let's start off with the low mids. Alright, so now there's a little bit more body. Now let's add some presence. Okay, that's a little closer. Alright, let's give ourselves a little bit more level. And I want to get a little bit more attack, so I'm going to head over to envelope 1 and just dip our sustain very slightly so that the leading edge is just slightly louder. And we could probably have just a little bit less click, so I'm going to extend our attack time. So I still want a little bit more punch at the beginning of each note, so I'm going to add a sound to our noise oscillator. I ended up settling on a bunch of the kicks worked fine. I think, let's see, I settled on guitar mute 1. Oh, set it in one-shot mode. Actually, I might have done guitar mute 2. And I sort of liked how it sounded in key tracking mode, even though it's a little bit random. And I just dialed the phase up slightly so that it's plucky, but it's not quite as plucky. Let's just solo it so you can hear. So in the reference, it sounds to me like there's some sort of a reverberant percussion part that's playing at the same time as the lead, but a different line. And I'm just using this to sort of emulate that. I don't think it's technically part of the same sound, but this gets us closer to the overall effect within the song. The reference also has another layer sitting behind the lead. It's slightly delayed. I'm hearing it leaning a little bit more on the right-hand side. There's definitely some stereo motion going on. I couldn't really find anything in Serum that I liked for that effect. I tried using the delay plugin and added too much phase, so I ended up settling on using just a little bit of dimension from the hyper dimension here. I'm going to put it after our compressor. So the reverb is adding the big sense of space, the long tail, but I also want something in here with more of a slapback room tone. So that's what we're using this for. I'm going to turn down the mix on hyper. We're not going to use that. And dial up our dimension here. So this is going to be your starting point. If you want to dial in a little more room noise, then you can turn up the mix on your dimension. You can use macro 1 to change the distortion tone. Or or play around with the wavetable position here for different sounds. And in case you want to automate your pitch bends manually, I'll set the pitch wheel to -12. So you can sweep in from an octave below. And if you're going to do that, just make sure that you undo the portamento settings here. And that should do it. If you like what we're doing here at Unison, I hope you'll hit subscribe. And if you have any comments or feedback or requests, please leave them in the comment section below. One lucky commenter and/or subscriber will receive a free Unison sound pack. And if you're interested in checking out more Unison trap sounds, we will link to those also in the description below. This has been Peter with Unison, and the track is RL Grime and Salva's remix of Travis Scott's Skyfall.